Please subscribe to his channel to see more videos like this. The wonderful ball was attended by a large number of distinguished guests who came to spend time in social conversation. However, upon entering the guest room, one of the guests particularly attracted attention. Looking at her ridiculous dress, the noble ladies could not help but laugh, covering their faces with fans. Approaching the table with desserts, the heroine thought for a long time about what to eat and decided to start with something soft. After standing there in thought for a while longer, she resolutely took a piece of strawberry cake from the table. Having broken off a slice and put it in her mouth, the girl was completely delighted with the delicate taste of this delicacy. After eating it, she began to choose the next delicacy, when suddenly some ladies approached her. Standing closer, they began to demonstratively wonder how the heroine could come to the imperial ball looking like that. Considering her incredibly ugly, the girls openly mocked her, casting disgusted glances. Other guests demonstrated open hatred towards the heroine, believing that she was a disgrace to all nobles. Having tasted some more sweets and calmly wiping her mouth with a napkin, the girl was absolutely indifferent to other people's opinions. Moreover, she was even proud of it, considering herself a very great woman. Today, the heroine had already done everything she wanted, so it was possible to gradually return. Turning towards the exit, she confidently walked there, blinding others with her determination. Shocked by such behavior, some considered it incredibly shameful. No one understood how she dared to behave like that, being one of the most ugly freaks in the empire. After leaving the imperial palace, the girl went to her carriage and, getting inside, headed home. While on the road, she took out her bag, carefully unfastening the latch on it. After that, she cast a spell, and a bright light came out of the bag, from which a comb floated. As it began to comb her head, her hair, curled into ridiculous buns, suddenly straightened out, turning into lovely curls. Running her palm over them, the girl was a little frightened by the strength of the main character today. It was really hard for her to bear all these contemptuous looks and caustic exclamations. After some time, she finally arrived at her family's majestic estate, proudly spread out across the plain. At the entrance to the building, a maid suddenly jumped out in front of the heroine, surprised that her mistress was already here. The girl raised her head indignantly, not understanding why she had to be scared like that. Because couldn't it be seen that she was here? Heading towards the stairs, she passed the maid, painfully bumping her shoulder. Turning to her with an offended expression, the maid decided that since her appearance was ugly, at least her soul should be pure. Enraged by these words, the heroine restrained herself with difficulty, reminding herself that she just needed to be patient a little. Once in her room, she plopped down tiredly on the sofa. Stretching out with a long yawn, she understood that rumors were spreading so quickly that they would surely soon reach Brother Louis. Her cousin Louis was the head of a baronial family and a very hard-hearted man. They all despised the heroine because of her appearance, but fortunately, they did not have to endure it for long. The girl decided to go wash her face, as she was completely saturated with negativity. Her real name was Cho Yun-Sol, and she was a makeup artist for the famous actress Jean Ura. This woman was the leading actress of the country, and she was extremely difficult to cope with. Working with popular people, it was difficult to avoid barbed phrases and unfounded gossip. Jean Ura also bullied her, thinking that the heroine was pretending to be good to get attention, and in the end, by some ridiculous coincidence, both girls ended up on the roadway. The car didn't have time to brake, and Cho Yun-Sol's life was cut short because of the actress. However, suddenly after death, a young guy appeared in front of the heroine, who turned out to be the god of death, Shinigami. Admitting that he had made a mistake, he was very upset that he had accidentally killed the girl. As an apology, he decided to make her the main character in another world. Immediately after this, the heroine was instantly transported through space and time, finding herself in the body of Isla Elst. It was the main character of a novel that Cho Yun-Sol had read many times. Besides her, the main characters were Prince Theobald Basio Brinia, Duke Henry Pradio, and Mark Alonso Louvenet. According to the plot, the girl must end up in a cage between three heroes, and in the end, she will drink a potion given by the prince and become his forever. It was an unhappy end to the affair that the new Isla was determined to avoid at all costs. Isla did all this with the help of her makeup skills and vast experience as a makeup artist. Taking off her ugly mask and looking in the mirror, she wanted to do everything possible to hide this beautiful face from everyone. The main character was imprisoned in a cage by 3 men because of her unearthly beauty. However, now, although she hid her appearance with all her might, the heroine dreamed of getting married successfully, which was the biggest problem. The law on compulsory marriage must be respected by everyone in the empire, and this law applies to 2 people for a year. According to this law, 3 men caught and put Isla in a cage, so the main character never even saw life. Also, for this reason, this novel had, in her past life, she was just making money and died unexpectedly. So, can a girl at least live this life the way she wants? At the same time, she understood that if it weren't for that guy, she would now continue living her life. In any case, Isla was grateful to him for giving her the magic cosmetic bag. Hysterical about what happened, she screamed in tears, blaming that guy for everything. Suddenly, Shinigami appeared in front of her again, shocked at how loudly she was crying. Hearing that he had come to fulfill any one of her wishes, Isla was very surprised. In addition, the desire must be from her world, and within reason, and also, only one. The heroine was upset by one attempt, and deciding that she did not need it, the god of death was about to leave. However, turning to him again, the girl wished for a cosmetic bag. Then Shinigami decided to ask if she had a small bag or something like that. Having found a suitable thing, the guy waved his hand, from which cosmetic accessories began to fly out in the flickering light. The bag shrank and turned into a magical cosmetic bag, which slowly fell into the heroine's hands. After that, the god of death began to come to her periodically, whenever he wanted. And now, there was very little time left before she grew up, and she just had to wait a little. The next morning, Becky the maid came to her mistress's chambers to invite her to breakfast. Hearing Isla's voice, the maid was surprised that she woke up so early today. However, when she walked inside and saw the lady sitting on the floor looking like an alcoholic, Becky wondered if she had gotten enough sleep. With frank disgust in her gaze, the maid politely invited the mistress to a meal. Besides, Becky wanted the girl to finally start behaving like a young lady from an aristocratic family. After all, she probably doesn't even suspect how many problems the Baron is currently having because of her, so she should be ashamed. The heroine was shocked by these words, her eyes wide open in amazement at the maid. Isla jumped up from the sofa and began to demonstratively express her indignation, considering Becky's behavior shameless. Besides, Isla's brother should be ashamed, since he ate more than anyone else at the last banquet. Later, going down to the dining room, the heroine did not understand what was wrong with this child. As soon as everything was decided, she was going to leave this house immediately. Entering the dining room, the girl politely wished her brother good morning. In response, he mockingly reminded her of his request not to be late, as he shamelessly gobbled up the food from the table. He was surprised that it took her so long to get ready. Sitting down at the table, Isla understood that he would probably start talking nonsense again. The hero wanted to know what she was thinking when she came to yesterday's banquet in that ridiculous dress. The girl shrugged, finding it quite beautiful, but her brother thought the dress was strange and ugly. Isla smiled in response, and decided to ask him if everyone had different tastes. According to the hero, no matter what she thinks, she will have to dress differently for the coming-of-age ceremony, otherwise, she risks remaining alone for the rest of her life. Of course, he didn't know why the girl dressed like that, and that she actually also wanted to date and get married. Understanding this, she decided to leave first. And her brother decided that she didn't know how to take offense. He also decided that she was a disgrace to their family, which finally drove Isla crazy. Confidently walking down the corridor, the heroine firmly decided that after the coming-of-age ceremony, everything would fall into place. After some time, in preparation for the coming-of-age ceremony, Isla put on a dark blue dress with pink and yellow ribbons. Seeing beads on her shoulders the size of a large potato, the maids could not hold back their laughter. Looking at herself in the mirror with a smile, the girl decided that she had tried her best. She had planned to look repulsive, and apparently, Isla realized that she had succeeded. The coming-of-age ceremony was a celebration of the imperial family, at which ladies made their first debut in high society. The original Isla, already at this ceremony, was caught by 3 men at once. In addition, she attracted Charlotte's jealousy, who from that day on began to mock the heroine in every possible way. The girl considered her future to be simply terrible, but at least she had her diary with her. She never thought that a cosmetic diary would be so useful. The whole story was written there, and for that, a huge thank you had to be expressed to that Shinigami. Looking sadly out of the carriage window, Isla kept repeating to herself that everything would be fine. After all, she had prepared well for the upcoming ceremony. The momentary shame would ensure her future safety, so she was determined to deal with it. Preparations for this day had been going on for 9 years, and now, the most crucial moment had arrived. With the thought that today everything would change completely, she resolutely stepped into the banquet hall. The guests who saw her didn't even have to say anything, being to the ceremony dressed like that. Hearing this, Isla smiled, realizing that her plan had worked perfectly. At that moment, the guests' gazes turned to Charlotte, who was wearing a dress that had recently been displayed in Raphael's dressing room. Shocked by its beauty, the other ladies realized that this dress could not even be bought. In turn, seeing this girl, Isla realized that the ceremony would soon, because everything was clear from their faces. Nobody understood how she even thought of calm. Suddenly, a royal servant appeared from the large doors at the end of the hall, announcing the arrival of the imperial family for the banquet. The young prince, with pitch-black hair and bright red eyes, majestically walked out to the guests. Besides him, Duke Henry and Mark Alonso appeared in the hall, and together they were the 3 main characters of the novel. Having greeted the guests and taken their seats, His Majesty gave the order to begin the celebration. The coming-of-age ceremony was opened, and the first to be invited to the podium was the daughter of the Pinatelli family. Proudly stepping forward, Charlotte Pinatelli walked smoothly and gracefully to the right place. Having respectfully greeted the imperial family with a curtsy, the girl turned her gaze to the prince. His Majesty was pleased to congratulate the lady on her coming of age, hoping that she would contribute to the future of the empire. Keeping her eyes on the prince, she decided to always strive to improve the Basium Empire. The prince also looked straight into Charlotte's eyes, and a smile played across his face. After leaving and returning to the guests, Lady Pinatelli proudly walked past the heroine. Looking at her, Isla, somewhere deep down, even envied this girl a little. If the story of the novel had not been so sad, then she certainly would not have behaved so vulgarly. And perhaps, in that case, it would even be possible to meet your love, but now, it is useless to think about it. Suddenly, the order was given for Baroness Leia L. Este to come to the podium. Coming out in her ridiculous form, the heroine nervously bowed in a curtsy, greeting the imperial family. With difficulty containing his disgust, His Majesty coldly congratulated her on her coming of age. Having thanked him in return, Isla thought only about the fact that it was almost all over. Turning around and starting to walk towards the guests, she decided that the most important thing now would be not to fall. But suddenly, the girl felt the touch of someone's hand, followed by a strong push. Before she could understand anything, Isla tumbled down the stairs straight towards the guests. Recovering from the horror she had experienced, she realized that someone had pushed her on purpose. However, this did not stop the guests from openly laughing at her, believing that it was hard to be so ugly. Unable to hold back her tears, the heroine saw that the Duke, Maris, and the prince were in different parts of the hall, not even turning their heads in her direction. Realizing that she had achieved her goal, and none of them were interested in her, the girl still felt some kind of depression. Hastily starting to leave, Isla assured herself that she had done everything right, and now everything would be fine. At the same time, to her surprise, she did not feel the joy of freedom, but on the contrary, everything inside was cramped with shame. Stepping aside, the heroine began to wipe away her tears with her hand. And suddenly, she heard someone calling her. Turning towards the voice, she suddenly saw Charlotte in the company of her friends. Lady Pinatelli pretended to be ill, and one of her friends demonstratively expressed concern for her. Charlotte smiled but almost passed out from shock at the sight before her. The girls were absolutely perplexed as to how a lady, and an aristocrat at that, could look so ugly. Suddenly, Duke Henry and Maris Alonso appeared, who, as it turned out, were looking for Lady Pinatelli. Having decided that during the ceremony, under no circumstances should she run into them, Isla apologized, after which she immediately turned around and ran away, leaving the heroes in confusion, looking after her with disappointment. The Mark had never thought before that such ugly ladies could exist. In contrast, Charlotte's gaze, directed at the fleeing girl, was filled with genuine contempt. The heroine herself was not very aware of anything at that moment, and was rushing towards the exit without looking back, hoping to go home. Running up to the stairs, she thought that since the official ceremony was over, nothing could stop her. But suddenly, someone appeared in front of her, descending the stairs, and the girl hit him painfully, falling to the floor again. The man was furious about what had happened, and to her horror, Isla recognized his voice. Prince Theobald stood in front of her and looked at the heroine with disgust. Deciding that her eyesight was clearly bad, the girl stared at him with puzzled eyes, frozen in shock, realizing that this was a complete failure. Pulling herself together and jumping up from the floor, she immediately rushed to apologize for her clumsiness. Isla tried very hard to avoid being noticed. But now, she had to come face to face with the main character. Deciding not to waste time, she respectfully bowed goodbye to the heir to the throne and ran away. Before this, Theobald had heard many rumors about this woman. And at that moment, he did not understand, was she really that ugly? Not only does she not fit into the imperial family, but she even raises doubts about whether she belongs to the nobility. Seeing the prince's thoughtful face, Charlotte wondered what he was thinking about. Smiling at him, the girl immediately began making eyes at the heir. Deciding to put aside unimportant thoughts, Theobald smiled back at Lady Pinatelli. However, thoughts about this ugly girl again crept into his head, because something was very strange. This woman had an incredibly pleasant aroma that did not suit her at all. The next morning, Isla's brother violently threw open the door to her room, shouting at his sister. Seeing her in a dress lying on the bed, he didn't understand what she was doing. Yesterday, the heroine cried a lot in bed and didn't even notice how she fell asleep. And now, seeing her eyes and face swollen from tears, the Baron was stupefied. He wondered what the former head of the family, and Isla's father, would think if he found out about her antics. Remembering her father, the heroine, without knowing it, was glad that he had passed away. After all, from that moment on, she moved in with her cousin and began to live for her own pleasure. Before this, the brother wanted to marry Becky when he married off his sister. But looking at her, he doubted that this was possible. So, starting tomorrow, he decided to send out letters throughout the year, proposing marriage to different families. If any family accepts her, he will immediately send his sister to them. But until then, he has put her under house arrest. While the Baron stood and told Isla off, Becky sat down near the door to her room, watching what was happening with a satisfied look. After the brother confronted the heroine with the fact of house arrest, he immediately left her room. Overjoyed, Becky could now rest easy. Because Isla had already found out about their relationship, therefore the girl hoped that now she and the lady would also have a special relationship. As she followed her fiancé, she only regretted that she had not told Isla about everything earlier. Finally alone, the heroine thought that overall she had held up quite well. Having praised herself for her excellent work, she decided to definitely reveal her face to a worthy person. Because of her brother, her plan was a little disrupted, but everything was fine, and she just needed to hold out until May. And then, she would be able to freely reveal her face. Looking tiredly out the window, the heroine urged herself to be patient a little longer. Several months had passed since she was forbidden to leave the house. During this time, except for her brother's moralizing and Becky's bullying, nothing special happened. And although Isla seemed to have gotten what she wanted, she had a feeling as if something was missing. But it's entirely possible that she was simply tired and angry about the situation. Over the past 10 months, no one had accepted her offer to marry her. Suddenly, a maid knocked on the door and entered to inform her that the Baron was waiting for her. Her mistress, looking at the person who entered, the heroine remembered that Becky no longer worked here as a maid. She took a radically different position in this mansion, and because of this, she did not allow herself to be angered by Isla. There were a couple of times when the heroine wanted to hit her, but she had to restrain herself. Meanwhile, accompanied by a maid, Isla safely arrived to her brother. To her surprise, the Baron cheerfully greeted his little sister, whom, As it turned out, he was very glad to see. Not understanding the reason for her brother's cheerful mood, the heroine cautiously walked to the sofa opposite him. But before she could sit down, she heard the news that her proposal had finally been accepted. The only thing that worried the heroine was that she had not heard anything about this duke, whose name was not mentioned in the original novel. The good thing was that by marrying him, she would not encounter the three main characters of the novel anyway. The Baron decided to immediately order his sister's things to be collected and sent to her fiancé the following day. The girl was surprised by such speed, but her brother did not want to delay, because if the Duke changed his mind, Isla would take responsibility for it. Tired of her antics, the Baron did not want to hear anything contrary to his decision. The next day, the suitcases were packed, and the heroine, in the blink of an eye, found herself on the threshold of the Duke's mansion. In Isla's opinion, throwing her out like that was too much, because what if this man turns out to be old and evil? Entering the mansion, the Duke of Monteltra personally appeared before her, thanking the girl for coming. Looking at the young man with a dazzling appearance, Isla did not understand where he was considered ugly. She immediately began to stare at him. Leaving Monteltra confused, he decided to ask her if she had any questions, and the girl immediately pretended that everything was fine. With his freckles and narrow eyes, the Duke did not really meet the imperial standards of beauty, but he was simply incredibly handsome. The only problem was his character, and it would probably take time to get to know him. Monteltra was a little surprised, expecting to see the heroine with many more things than she actually had. Isla couldn't find anything to say, remembering how her brother decided to make fun of her in this way and gave her an old, battered carriage. She looked down at the floor sadly, thinking that no one had ever taken care of her properly. For a moment, the Duke looked at her silently, waiting to hear something. But hearing only silence, he decided that the heroine was tired from the road, and they could continue the conversation tomorrow. As he was about to leave, he suddenly heard the determined voice of a girl who wanted to talk now. She wasn't tired at all, and she was curious about where exactly they would talk. Having invited his bride to follow him, the Duke ordered his butler, Vincent, to help her with her luggage. Carefully taking the lady's suitcase, the butler hurried to carry it to her room. Looking at Monteltra, the heroine believed that although he behaved very politely, he was somehow distant and cold. Besides, he was a duke, so there must be a reason why he suddenly decided to marry the daughter of a simple baron. The feeling of anxiety did not leave the heroine, and she wanted to immediately make sure of everything before deciding what to do next. Sitting down with her over a cup of tea, Monteltra immediately decided to clarify the reason for his consent to the engagement. Taken aback by the surprise, Isla became even more wary when she heard that he had two reasons for this. Firstly, the Duke wanted rumors and gossip to stop bothering him. The second reason was the intervention of the imperial family, which greatly puzzled the heroine. After the death of the previous leader, and the hero's brother, his wife became the Duchess and began to rule the duchy. Therefore, Monteltra, who has imperial blood in his veins, decided not to ruin his reputation in order not to lose his status. Therefore, he needs a mistress in the mansion who will be in charge of everything here. The girl became curious about what rumors were troubling the Duke, after which he suddenly shuddered. When Isla learned that because he was still unmarried, people considered him homosexual, she was shocked, having suddenly drooped after this. For Monteltra, this was far from the most pleasant topic of conversation. The Duke wasn't sure if the heroine knew, but he also had a nephew. The boy is the son of his late brother and was originally supposed to take over the management of the duchy, but he is still too young. So he will be the next ruler of the duchy after the hero. Therefore, Monteltra chose for himself exactly that girl who was also not particularly interested in marriage. Hearing that love was completely unimportant to him, the heroine was stunned. And if she didn't cross the line, he intended to sign over all his property to the girl. Thus, having laid out all his conditions, he also wanted to hear the heroine's conditions. After analyzing his words, Isla decided that she would have only one condition. After the conversation, the butler Vincent escorted the lady to her new bedroom, wishing her a good evening. Isla was stunned by the size of the room and its incredible luxury. Of course, she had assumed in advance that it would be on a different level, but reality exceeded expectations. Remembering her stated condition, she thought that it would be nice to live at least a year in such a house. She wanted them to fake her death after a year had passed, after the official marriage. Seeing the Duke's pale face, the girl hastened to clarify that she simply wanted to disappear from the Empire, and that her death would not be real. Understanding her plan, Montelter decided that the easiest way to change his personality would be to move to another country. For Isla, only the result was important, so she happily agreed to this offer. Besides, she wanted the Duke to worry less about all sorts of rumors. After all, unlike him, the heroine was always surrounded by gossip. Looking at her closely, Montelter realized that it seemed the future Duchess was not bothered by such rumors. Without paying attention to his words, Isla wanted to hear them again, but the Duke decided that their conversation could end there. Now, sitting in a hot bath, the heroine remembered that she had been waiting for this moment for 10 years. And now, there was only a year left until she gained freedom. Of course, most likely the relationship with the Duke would be strained, but she didn't really need love either. In 2 months, their wedding ceremony would take place, and now all that remained was to wait. The next morning, Isla put on her ugly makeup again. Looking in the mirror with a satisfied face, considering the result to be simply amazing, she decided that she had done a great job. On the very first day of living in this mansion, the Duke suggested having lunch together. Leaving the room and getting ready to go to him, the heroine suddenly saw a boy hiding behind the wall. Standing abruptly in front of him, she happily greeted the young boy, shocking him. Noticing that he looked very much like the Duke, Isla concluded that he was his nephew. Considering him a sweet little angel, she suddenly heard in response that such an ugly woman should not dare to look at him anymore. After which the boy started to run, leaving the heroine in a kind of dissonance. She could not reconcile in her mind such an angelic appearance with such rude words. A few minutes later, the Duke, his nephew, and his bride gathered at one large table. Montelter drank calmly from his glass, thinking about something with his eyes closed. At the same time, the young heir to the Duche was vigorously picking at his plate with a knife and fork, trying to cut off a piece of steak. Meanwhile, the heroine silently watched what was happening, feeling that it was becoming harder to breathe with every second. Unlike the atmosphere at her brother's, it was very quiet here during the meal. But still, the mood was quite oppressive. Suddenly, the Duke wondered if Michael had greeted his future aunt. If the nephew had not done this yet, then now was the time. After looking intently at Isla, the boy reluctantly greeted the lady. The heroine also hurried to say hello, but he immediately turned his head away. Remembering their last meeting, the girl thought that Michael probably didn't want to communicate with the ugly woman anymore. However, it was not the first time that children did not perceive her as a person. Suddenly, Michael dropped the knife from his hand, and it fell to the floor, making a distinctive ringing sound. One of the maids immediately rushed to give him another knife to replace the one that had fallen. Seeing how he blushed, the heroine considered him overly sensitive, which, however, is not surprising for a child. But suddenly, the new knife also safely fell out of his hand, leaving Isla confused. The heir blushed even more. Looking down at the knife lying on the floor, then the maid brought him not only a new knife but also a fork just in case. The heroine did not understand what exactly had happened, but she had a persistent feeling that something was clearly wrong. The maid looked with obvious disdain at the clumsy gentleman who was unable to even hold a knife. Having handed him the new instruments, he didn't even have time to properly take them when suddenly they fell to the floor again. The other servants immediately began to whisper among themselves, looking intently at the young heir. The heroine, in turn, realized that there was now too much pressure on the child. Calling Vincent over to her, Isla decided to ask him something. After listening to her words, the butler, beaming with joy, immediately hurried to prepare everything. The first thing he did was go to the maid who was serving Michael and sent her to the kitchen. After that, he took the plate from Michael and put it on the table in front of the heroine. The boy was extremely surprised to see that the meat and everything else on the plate was cut into neat pieces. In addition, the girl considered these knives and forks too heavy for the child, so they had to be replaced next time. Michael hurried to finally enjoy the food, and Isla could tell from his face that he really enjoyed it. The heroine knew these piercing glances better than anyone, because she herself had gone through them and therefore understood him. However, she was already an adult, so how hard is this for an ordinary child? Watching what was happening, the Duke did not take his eyes off the bride for several seconds, after which he suddenly turned away sharply, looking down. Having finished his meal, he hurried away to clear his head and collect his thoughts. Isla really turned out to be completely different from what he expected to see. He wouldn't have recognized her if it weren't for the smell, and the hero couldn't stop thinking about her. Several years ago, young Montelter unexpectedly met an angel who came down from heaven. A sweet girl with beautiful lilac hair was walking somewhere, accompanied by servants. Suddenly, she turned to him, feeling his gaze on her from the side. Deeply embarrassed, the hero immediately lowered his head, blushing heavily and afraid to look at her. With difficulty overcoming himself, he raised an uncertain gaze to the girl, wanting to greet her. However, what he saw left him in incredible shock and with the feeling that a bulldozer had run over him. Isla looked at the hero like he was trash, and her gaze showed complete disgust for him. Those eyes reminded him of the prince who had publicly insulted him and his brother, deciding that they were both incredibly ugly that day. Montelter could not even raise his head, feeling the deepest shame. But for some reason, even years later, he could not forget her scent and eyes. And now he heard rumors about the ugly Baroness with bewilderment. After thinking about the girl's proposal for a long time, he finally decided to accept it, shocking Vincent at that moment. He decided that now he would see her with his own eyes and smell that scent again. But Isla's face and eyes, as it turned out, had changed a lot since then, and now everything felt completely different. In any case, as he himself had already calculated, he did not need any love. It was all because of the damned imperial family and that prince. The Duke also had the blood of an ancient wolf in his veins, making him the first branch of the imperial family. The history of the Basium Empire began when the wolf Lupus fell in love with a woman. Wolves fall in love once in their lifetime, and the wolf god Lupus could also only love one partner. The empire that revered its god and was created by him has always been a place where romance and love were valued. However, due to arranged marriages, the concept of love began to gradually disappear from people's lives. In the empire, marriage and family were considered normal, so in order to get true love, the nobility began to have someone on the side. This was the case with Monteltra's parents and brother, but he didn't like to remember it. His parents truly loved each other even after they had children. This also applied to his brother, who died in a car accident. Therefore, the hero hoped that he was doing the right thing by entering into a marriage of convenience. As a result, the person who hurt him badly in the past suddenly becomes his partner. After some time, he met with Isla again to convey to her all their conditions drawn up in the form of a contract. The Duke handed them over to the girl for inspection, intending to immediately correct anything she didn't like. The heroine was surprised to see part of her new identity connected to a small country that favors artists. Later, she will appear there as a young lady who was once a low-ranking noblewoman, but now this girl has become free and has arrived in this city to lead a quiet, measured life. Watching her read so intently, Montelter wondered if there was anything that needed to be corrected. However, smiling at him, Isla was completely delighted with such a story. The hero didn't know why exactly she wanted to change her identity, but he understood that it didn't concern him. In turn, the heroine also did not understand why the Duke was not against her conditions. Besides, she had one question for him that had been bothering the girl for a long time. She wanted to know that if everything was so urgent, then why couldn't they get married now? Why wait a year? The reason turned out to be that he still had to go through the coming-of-age ceremony before he could get married. Realizing that the Duke was 1 year younger than her, the girl was quite taken aback. Monteltra was a little confused by her expression, but Isla was simply shocked by the unexpectedness. The Duke understood that since he had not told her anything, the girl could not know this. Handing her a pen, he wanted her to sign the contract if she agreed with everything. Isla was very surprised to see a large magic stone on the tip of the feather, but thinking that this was not surprising for the Duke, she happily signed the contract. Having received it back, Montelter called to his butler, who approached him with a cart. There was a large container of water on it, into which the Duke calmly dropped the contract. Suddenly, a bright beam of light came out of the water, and the ink on the paper began to slowly disappear. This is how the Duke's family handled documents that required confidentiality. Hearing from Isla that it was very similar to magic, Montalter froze for a while, after which he calmly continued the conversation. Remembering that his nephew wanted to enter the academy, therefore the entire house would be at her disposal. And on this note, Montalter gave the heroine a copy of the contract. At this point, their conversation ended, and as they left, the girl wished him all the best. The Duke smiled back, determined to do his best to be a worthy husband this year. He also wished her a good day, but as soon as he disappeared behind the door, his face immediately faded. He remembered with bewilderment her words about how hiding what was written was like magic. Only the imperial family knows about the existence of magic in the empire. And how could such a thing be known to a simple daughter of a baron? Besides, that time when they were children, she had cruelly ridiculed him, driving him to despair. But since then, her appearance and look had changed so much, as if she had become a different person. However, the aroma remained the same, and the Duke did not understand how he could accept it now. Some time later, Isla was walking in the garden with Vincent, learning from him that the god Lupus had given his beloved hydrangeas, so these flowers were in the Duke's garden, and that was the only place where they grew. Hearing this, the heroine was delighted. But the butler hoped that since she was now a duchess, she would behave more restrained. It was still difficult for Isla to get used to the fact that she was now being addressed like that. After the walk, she came to the gazebo to drink tea. Be that as it may, thanks to the Duke, she feels that she will be free very soon, hoping that everything would be as she wanted. The heroine suddenly heard a rustling sound from behind the bushes. Turning around in fear, she demanded that whoever was hiding there show himself. However, there was no answer, and she assumed that a wild animal wanted to attack her. Wanting to know everything before telling the Duke, she went over and reached into them to check. Seeing a young gentleman there with a plant stem entangled in his hair, Isla was extremely puzzled. Suddenly, the boy became curious about why this ugly woman was looking at him. Isla, the cattle, is outraged because all the words she heard from him were insults. Having calmed down, the heroine decided to just talk to him first. Hiding her indignation behind a smile, she gently demanded that Michael stop behaving like that. Despite the smile, she looked warlike, which horrified the boy. With a downcast face, he suddenly wanted Isla to help him untangle his hair from the stem. Crouching down in front of him, the girl carefully took the plant, slowly beginning to free her hair from it. The heroine did not understand why she had to do this. Her hair was tangled in a knot. Having untied them with difficulty, freeing them from the plant, the girl joyfully shook the boy. She still wanted to know what exactly he was doing in the bushes, but Michael decided that it was none of her business. Taking another petal from his head, Isla assumed that he had simply decided to study the vegetation. Frozen for a moment in a